Did you ever wonder why when a dog goes from fear to anger, it's like a rubber band? There's no middle ground, right? There's a glandular chemistry that makes fear and anger mutually exclusive. But also there's an electrical fingerprint. It's related to something called vasoconstriction and vasodilation. To vasodilate is to make your hand red. Would you like to be of the order of the red hand? What that enables you to do is send your blood to the surface and thus create an antenna structure. It turns out that vasoconstriction and vasodilation obeys the laws of physics called conservation of angular momentum. So when the ice skater pulls in her hands and speeds up, begins going much faster, it's called conservation of angular momentum. And what happens when you vasoconstrict or bring your blood to the core, you change from an umbrella into a bullet. And there's some difference there between fear and anger, you see. That when the blood is at the core, you stored your inertia. But also at that time, you have retracted from feeling, because blood follows water, follows magnetism, follows symmetry, follows awareness. So the ability to send your blood to the surface allows you to be able to prehend, to be able to be the antenna for magnetism. And when your lover touches your body, if her skin turns pink, you know she likes you. Well, if a dowser's walking along, you have a row of dowsers, right? And you come and you say, let's see if everybody can feel this ley line. Sometimes the ley line will jump out to meet you, okay? Because the earth is saying, here, I will send my magnetism, my blood, because I'm enjoying this touch. Other times, if the magnetism goes away, so that at Vukovar in Yugoslavia, after the war, when the underground water disappeared, the earth is saying, it's painful to touch here. I'm going to vasoconstrict instead of vasodilate. Yeah? Or if you have a native elders massacre, like the Aborigines are massacred, and a bunch of their tribal spirits are stuck magnetic fields in the rock, preventing magnetism from unpacking, then it stops raining. You can understand the physics, yeah? Because water follows magnetism, follows symmetry, follows awareness. So water goes to the place where magnetism converges non-destructively, makes fire. And so if there's slip knots of magnetism in the land that have not come to the fire, the centering force, the place where magnetism becomes shareable, then the magnetism stops flowing. And this leads to the Peace University project, which we'll talk a little bit about today. The Peace University project is based on the work of Professor Phil Callahan, and it's part of my story, I suppose. I went down and I made a film with Professor Phil Callahan called Tuning Into Nature and Antennas of Nature. Anybody heard of Professor Phil Callahan in Florida? Yeah. Yeah. He's rather famous. One of the things he showed was that you could predict where peace versus war would break out by simply measuring the magnetic flux permissivity in the soil. So you go around and you take this cheap little magnetic flux permissivity. Magnetic flux permissivity is a name for how easy does magnetism pass. That's it. That's all it is. So you measure how easy magnetism passes in the soil, and you get a predictor not only for fertility, but you get a predictor for war versus peace, statistically. He went to Israel, Yugoslavia, Ireland. He could show that magnetic lines in the soil, when you can't get the magnetism through the soil, you're going to have war. Does anybody know why? The why is because magnetism is the wind on which love travels, right? And so you have this magnetic flux conductivity between villages. And when the magnetism can move between villages, guess what moves between villages? Emotion, love, that's right. So what would cause the magnetism to not be able to pass through the soil? Yes? Which is another name for lack of symmetry. So magnetism follows symmetry, follows awareness. So by restoring symmetry, you create conductivity. And when you create conductivity, you end war. Okay? So what happens is, we know the electrical symmetry of the magnetic field around the heart, which creates peace. You're going to see that measured here. Maybe we'll play at the end of the day today, too. So we'll hook up the little heart tuner, and you'll see the electrical symmetry that enables magnetism in the heart to become stable and make peace. And we see that the shape of that magnetism, which is right here, is the same shape of the magnetism in the land that makes peace. So this is called the International University for the Science of Peace. There's campuses already in three countries. The website is soulinvitation.com/Peace University. Yes, dear. The question was, how would we apply this science of teaching peace magnetically in the land to the Middle East situation? The Middle East is an example of how bees gather at a place where magnetism converge, and they create a swarm. Okay? That's what the Middle East is. Now, the reason bees create a swarm is because they've located a place where enough magnetism converges to begin to braid and make sweetness, which they call honey. We call it oil. Similar concept. So what happens is, literally, you can predict where population centers will grow based on where magnetism converges non-destructively. It's called a sacred site, but it simply means that where magnetic lines cross in a fractal, the compression stored there becomes a standing wave. And the more stable that standing wave, the more sacred the site. So here you have a bunch of bees that are hungry for magnetism. But they have a little problem. You know what their problem is? Biology was designed to be an engine to create implosion for magnetism, something we call gravity. So DNA and human glands are fractal enough to create the implosion, compression, wind of charge that becomes self-organizing when it goes to center. And that centripetal, implosive wind of charge making centering force, which we call attention, we call it enlightenment, we call it zero-point energy. We have a lot of names for it. It's based on the physics of fusion, and this is the exact three-dimensional model. And that's why that's the symmetry of DNA and hydrogen and the heart of the sun, that you have that implosion model. So biology was designed to make that fire. It's called light your own fire, right? So when you experience enlightenment, you experience this magnetism coming to center, and you make so much wind with it that it feeds you and you become immortal, and your DNA speeds up and you go through the speed of light. And as we say, if you don't, it's fatal. So what happens is, if you have a bunch of people who have lost the skill to do this for themselves, when you lose the skill to create implosion electrically inside your body, which is sometimes called bliss, then